Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Chalk Talk session. We got Tyler Sansom back. Tyler and I had a conversation a little while back and talked about the digital church and kind of where things were going. Tyler's back. Welcome, Tyler.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. It's glad to have you here. So Tyler and I are going to talk about kind of a bit of an approach of how do we look at the analytics or the scoring or the scorecard concept of managing the online church and what does that look like? I think there's a lot of different approaches that we've all seen over the past several months since COVID's hit, and kind of the transition. A lot have gone to online from a house of worship or church. And Tyler's developed a concept and a process for his own church at Church Anywhere. And it's been helpful. So we're going to let Tyler kind of talk about that and go through that process. So Tyler, what is this scorecard? I think we kind of talked about what's a healthy way to look at the numbers. How do we approach it? Now, one of the things that before you get started is that I really took away from our last conversation, and I think has been resonated, that I've talked to several people about, is relationships trump technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
The technology is a tool and a means to transport in what we're doing from a church and online activity. So I think that was I've talked to several people, and they said that they really have taken that as a powerful statement, that at the end of the day that we're working with relationships over the digital hemisphere. So I'll let you take over now and kind of share a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, first off, in digital ministry on the internet, it's really, really easy to get caught up in vanity metrics. We see the little number below the Facebook video that says like 3,000, and we think, oh my gosh, we're a church of 3,000 now. Before COVID, we were 40. Yeah. What's happening? And so a basic understanding about how different social media platforms, different platforms for live streaming, how they capture their analytics is a good place to start. So like, for example, Facebook tracks 3-second views. That's what you see in the little number under the video. But if you go within Creator Studio, you can find much more detailed analytics. So what we track on a weekend service basis is something called quality views. And essentially it boils down to 25% of the video. So for a weekend service, we only count people who have stayed for 15 minutes. You can find that in Creator Studio. There's a little graph that says audience retention. You can just hover over the 15-minute mark, see the percentage of people that stayed. On YouTube, it's a lot easier. Google Analytics, it's a lot easier because you have a lot more vast metrics. Mm-hmm. But the first thing to do is understand that the internet's filled with vanity metrics, and you have to kind of sift through those and figure out what's actually happening. So for us, we thought the best way to do it would be quality views for a weekend service, but we realized that the weekend service is only part of the equation. For Church Anywhere, our online ministry is more than just on a Sunday. And so we wanted to make sure that we're tracking the growth and the health of the people we engage with online. So we came up with this scorecard.
Absolutely. So Tyler's going to probably jump in. Do you want to jump into the scorecard now and kind of go through that? Is that what you'd like to do?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay. There we go. Now we've got Tyler picture in picture. Go for it.
All right. So at the top of this Google sheet, we have something called a growth trend. It's lit right now. You can see the month of September here, and we track things like quality views for family ministry, adult ministry. We track them for our various niche pages. You can check out some of our stuff online to learn more about those. But we have 2 pages called Jesus Anywhere, Parenting Anywhere. We have a podcast. All of this stuff gets compiled into one graph. And at the end of the month, we can have a growth trend that's either up or down. So we stack this against previous months. Now, the bottom half of this document is what excites me the most. So we have a growth trend on the top. We have a health scorecard on the bottom. We have selected several next steps that we want our people to go through, and we've given each of them a weighted grade. So for example, a new group member is worth 1 point, a connection card is worth 1 point. But if someone makes the decision to start their own microsite and commit for a full year to doing in-person ministry and becoming a volunteer campus pastor, that's worth 10 points because that's a much bigger step. So our admin goes in each week, puts the numbers from that week in, and then the spreadsheet multiplies by whatever point that it's worth. And at the end, we have one health score for the month. That's really cool because it allows us to track next steps and health across a long amount of time. So for example, if like July was 450 and then August was 350, we would look back and see which areas of next steps that we're not doing quite as well in.
Fantastic.
So I think that pretty much sums up the health scorecard idea.
Tyler, that was fantastic. I think that's cool. I think that, I think the challenge right now that I keep hearing from a lot of people is, and they ask me from a streaming technology or industry perspective, is what is the standard? And I have to explain to them that there is no standard, right?
Right.
It's based on what's important to your organization and what you want to measure. Now for the church, I think the challenge has been kind of like, how do we manage these relationships? How do we manage taking it, like you said, I think that's a great example of Facebook, because I think there's been a lot of attention in using the freebie platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, many others out there, to reach a lot of people. But unfortunately, if you're not well-versed or understanding the data gathering models by which a lot of these organizations have built their process while you're streaming, you can kind of get lost in the maze of all of it, right? And you can easily overstate or understate. And so I think that was one question that came up to me. The other one was the duration. I like what you said about Facebook, because I think that's one area of their analytics you can look at in terms of looking at the duration. And I've talked to people, and I don't know, get your input on this, is that one approach in terms of the relationship is like I present the model of, listen, if somebody came in your church and sat down for 3 seconds and then got up and left, that's how you're measuring. You have to take the same approach to online as you would them physically be in your church. Does that resonate? Do you see that? I mean, I think that's kind of what I think the challenge people are having is, how do we look at this, but more importantly, how do we engage as a ministry?
Sure. I agree 100%. We would not count them as a attender if they came for 3 seconds and then immediately walked out of the building. But at the same time, what I love about this model is my goal as a pastor is not to grow the biggest numerical church. The Great Commission is to go out and make disciples. So we're not called to build the biggest building and fill it with as many people as possible. We're called to make as many disciples as we can. And so this health score sheet kind of keeps the main thing. It's no longer like butts in seats or views is the king metric. This allows us to weight where we want our people to go and then track that rather than just butts in seats and offering.
And so as you kind of go through that, kind of your experience has been in sharing that, you've developed that from a leadership perspective as a pastor and with the other team, with the pastoral leadership team. Do you see where that's added some, I don't want to say value, but in a way contributed towards maybe looking at as a ministry, how you develop ways you can engage with those online better in terms of helping them in their growth as a believer, as a Christian? We talk about teaching, right? We can reach a lot of people. It comes back to the point of, as part of the Great Commission of teaching and helping training. Yeah. And as people especially with COVID and with the restrictions and social distancing and everything going on right now with the just a lot of things happening at once, I think the questions come up is, how do we manage these families, these relationships? How do we get them plugged into areas of the ministry to help them grow individually as well as the family, right?
Yeah, and so to be able to look at a 30,000-foot view of the next steps allows us to evaluate what kinds of materials we need to teach for the next month. So for example, a few months ago, we realized we didn't have very many people sharing their stories That's a metric that we count. It's a highly weighted metric. Like, we want people to be evangelistic, but that wasn't going well. So we were able to put together a campaign called I Am Church Anywhere, and we challenged people to do like a 90-second Facebook or YouTube live video from their own cell phone about what God has done in their life. And so by having these kinds of analytics, it allowed us to say, like, okay, June, not that many people shared their story, but now July, that's what we're focusing on, because we want to get that part back up. Absolutely. Which relationally makes a ton of sense. If you're in a marriage and the marriage is struggling, you want to get to the root of the issue. But if the only thing that you tracked was how many days you spent with your wife that month, it wouldn't make much sense to get to the root of the issue. So that this kind of a model allows us to kind of pinpoint where we're struggling in.
And I think that, I think we see that, right? I mean, we see that with the situation where we've gone on now, 7 months or something, and I'm in the state of California, and they just announced that, Disneyland hasn't reached level orange or yellow, and they're not opening anytime soon. And so as people are kind of in this state of mind of, quite honestly, just anxiousness. How do we help them get to the point, especially for those that are in the church, but those that we're reaching outside the church, right? As you've talked and you've shared so much about in your ministry and the prisons and things that you've developed in terms of you as an outreach effort and doing what you're doing. One of the things I guess one of the questions that I've had and dialoguing with some other people with some other churches is we've talked about, okay, well, how do we get them plugged into a Bible study or a group, or is that an area that you continue to look at from a ministry perspective of how you get people engaged, not only sharing their story, but looking at how do we help teach them, cultivate what God wants to do in their lives, right? And what he wants to do in transforming the inside of that person, as you talked about, that would impact their marriage, their relationship with their families.
Yeah. So I don't know how much I want to get into this because it's still a thing that we're working on, but we're working on a total flip on how we do discipleship, a very holistic approach. We kind of got the idea from Walmart, which is bizarre. But see, Walmart is remodeling all of their stores across the country, and they're making a phygital model. So our local Walmart just got remodeled, and if you walk into it, there's like different square pods of things that you can buy, and above them there are signs. Now these signs match the logo verbatim for what is on the app, and the store is laid out exactly like the app is laid out. So in sense, they're becoming phygital. Like, the experience that you can have shopping for something on the app will match what happens in person, and vice versa. So we looked at that and said, well, how could the church utilize that kind of a model and tweak it in order to move people along their faith journey in the way that we want them to? So put that on one side, and then we realized that we have to start mobilizing our people. Online ministry is very consumeristic. We had to figure out a way to mobilize them. And so we kind of meshed that together. And starting in December, we're trying out this model that we're going to call Outfitters. So
I like it.
Church Anywhere, First Capital. First Capital is our physical location. Church Anywhere is our online microsites. Imagine them being a Walmart, like a superstore. Our vision as a church is to help people find and follow Jesus. So imagine in that store, there's a find section and a follow section. We've created subsections within these aisles, these sections in a store, where we believe that you have to know God in order to follow him. You have to love people in order, and there's different subsections. In each week of the month of December, we're challenging our people every day, online and in person, to basically metaphorically take something off of every single one of these shelves. So we've come up with strategies that will be on this scorecard that we'll measure to make sure that every single person gets a well-rounded, holistic, phygital discipleship path for the month of December. And then we'll reevaluate then. But that's kind of what we're kicking around now to move people forward and start mobilizing them.
Well, I think it's good. And the reason why I'll say this, I'll preface it just not just saying it's good, right? Just to say it's good. I think we're at a point in time where our nation's at, where communities and people are at, and I've talked to a few folks about this, is strategically thinking, right? And that's an area for, we've been used to one process we've had for so long in the church. This situation that we're in terms of the pandemic and other social, political, whatever you want to go down the list of, just to say environmental wise, you're seeing a lot of large consumer corporations like Walmart and others change the behavior of how they run their organization because of the restrictions for social distancing. And that's a great example. Streaming is the same way, where we're looking at how do we deliver the content, not only do a production and capture, but how do you distribute that content? How do you make that more widely available? But the important part of it is helping people navigate the process and getting them engaged so that they can have a direction. And I think the challenge has been, unfortunately, there's been a lot of great ideas and a lot of approaches to different ways you can do things. But on what becomes kind of the complexity, if you will, is how do we take that and simplify that process and help them direct and give them a path. And I think that, the Bible teaches us that, right? It's clearly God's instruction to us on how we are to live in wisdom and worship and teaching and all of the various richness of what the word teaches us from God back to us. And so I think that's a great approach. I think that we do have to take not out of the box ideas, but ways of how we help engage with people. And I think that, with the vastness of the online digital hemisphere, and numbers just came out yesterday again showing the explosive growth in terms of how many people are on mobile, how many hours they're online a day, right? Because they're isolated, and we're seeing other issues of mental illness, other impacts. And we need to get to where people are at so that you can help them, and individually, family, friends, just the fellowship. There's the limitation to the face-to-face contact that we have. We've got to bring a way of bridging that gap, I think, and I think that's great. And and I appreciate you just sharing that. I'm encouraged, and I think that's kind of the goal that we have here, everybody, is to talk about this is a dialogue. It's not simply a matter of Tyler and I kind of covering these topics. I think it's about engaging in where we're at in ministry and what we can do together. We have the tools, and again, to Tyler's point, relationships trump technology. I said this to a very large technology partner. I got a little bit of silence, but I said, look, technology is a tool, right? And I say this as somebody who's been in the technology industry over 25 years. And I've worked with the large entities of the software companies in a variety of different ways. And the innovation we've seen. There's no doubt there's been a lot of innovation and a lot of things we can use. Unfortunately, as great as that is, it can also be a challenge by which we lose the connection point of the human factor, and that's the person involved. And I think as a webcast producer, Tyler, I think that, often many times I would sit there doing a live stream, and you guys do this right now with the ministry, seeing the comments, seeing the people. It's not simply just that person watching, it's that person sharing their story. The one person sharing, saying that she held her phone up to her mom who was in a hospital bed. I think that she was either terminally ill or very sick, and being able to hear the worship service. You can't measure that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's the ministry that we bring to the person on the other end of the spectrum. And all these things, these tools and all these devices that we have are great, but it's really the people that we're trying to reach. And I think I appreciate and thankful for what you're doing and the scorecard and just sharing that.
You sent me a Hootsuite document that had a bunch of analytics, and that actually really impacted what we were thinking through with this Outfitters thing, because like 6 hours and 49 minutes, I believe, was the average time people spend on the internet on their phone worldwide. And it made us, the same way that technology is just a tool, is the same way that a weekend worship service for a church is also just a tool. for a long time, we've made that basically the end goal, or at least the major part of what we do as a body of believers. But if we're expecting people to be changed and fully devoted followers of Christ with 1 hour on a Sunday per week, when they're on their cell phones 6 hours a day, we need to start thinking differently, which pushed us in the direction of how can we be more holistic and involve the other 167 hours in this person's life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That was Tyler's referring to a report that I sent out. I actually shared this in a summit. To give you an update, Tyler, that number is now up over 7 hours. So it's
crazy.
Increased. And that's in the October report. And I just saw the report last night from Simon Kemp, who's a contact of mine out of the UK, who pulls that Hootsuite and all those. The numbers are mind-boggling, right? That's just mobile. I'm not counting the time. We're not looking at the additional numbers, and I'll be happy to put a link in the description along. Tyler and I talked about also making the scorecard available as a sample that you could look at. But yeah, I thank you. I sent that out to several people, not thinking like, okay, well, look, here's a report. I don't know if it'll be helpful or not, but here you go, right? In the streaming industry, we're looking at that. And in fact, we're seeing even larger numbers of those that are engaging through apps. You know, a lot of people have gone through the mobile devices. That's one approach. We're also seeing a lot of engagement in terms of the streaming activity when it comes to the what we call, some people might look at as OTT or linear applications. And what we talk about is, what I'm really saying is TV connected apps. These are where people are interfacing through the Rokus, the Fire apps, the Apple TVs, right? So how do we, again, this comes back to what we say is like, okay, well, if I'm doing a live stream or we're capturing that content and we're distributing that, how do we enable that individual to be aware of the fact, this goes back to your point, do an announcement of that outfitter opportunity, right? So that we kind of also create another distribution point to reach people that are also on the connected TV apps. And if you look at Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, and now they're starting to integrate the watch parties, where we saw people going through Facebook and different elements to do watch parties. A lot of these apps are now introducing watch parties. And now people can watch together through remotely, right? And nobody would have thought about this several months ago. And it's what we've talked about with people is not that the technology wasn't available or there. It just wasn't presented as from an adoption perspective because now, but because of where we're at, now we're seeing this. And another contact of mine in the streaming industry, the numbers are just mind-boggling to me. And so we're seeing this opportunity. So what I say is this is an opportunity, not to present another level of complexity, like, how do we figure this out? I think this is going to be an area of we have to really think about our strategy, whether it's a 180-day plan, whether it's 6 months or a year. I think that we have to develop a process by which we can look at this. So yeah, absolutely. So I will put a link for everybody on the report I just got last night, and I will send it to you, Tyler, as well, and let you guys get involved and see that. It really gives you a kind of a snapshot of what's going on and where people are spending the time. And social media is a big one, but we're also seeing other dramatic growth. But no, thank you. I will be praying about that and where you guys are going, because I think this is really important. And I think that as we go forward in this dialogue and this conversation is having these additional discussions of where we can talk about that phygital type approach that our good friend Jeff Reed and others have presented. But I think there's an opportunity here. And how do we bridge the gaps? How do we look at this? It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exact. But it's an area that we can work together as the church, and I think this is fantastic. I'm really encouraged.
Awesome, good deal.
So Tyler, thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you're doing, and folks, we're going to put some links in here when this is posted that you can look at and take an example of how you could develop a scorecard. Maybe there's some questions. If you have, leave them in the comments. Again, it really helps if you share your comments and show your interest in this, because then we can get you connected with Tyler. We can give some ways you can contact him and he can follow up, or have somebody in his organization that can provide some direction for you. As if you have questions for me, happy to help from the live streaming production and go from there. So Tyler, thank you for your time today. It's just a precious opportunity. This has been great. Not only a great time to connect, a great time of fellowship. And I've enjoyed it. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you again. Leave your comment, subscribe, ring that bell. However you want to engage, please engage. God bless and have a great day.